I love the old school Fire Emblem games, especially the ones on the Super Famicom, but I never really followed the series closely after that. I know the franchise has grown much more popular in recent years, especially after Marth's inclusion in the Smash Bros. Games, but I just wasn't very intrigued by its most recent offerings. I have to be honest though, when I saw the teaser footage for Fire Emblem Engage, it sparked my curiosity for one reason I didn't expect. Even though it seemed flashy, modern, and didn't exactly have my favorite style of presentation, the aspect that stood out to me was that the game really seemed to be trying to draw in older fans of the franchise in a really creative way. More on that in a bit, but it did enough to interest me, so I decided to give it a spin. So did it live up to my expectations? Well, let's find out. Fire Emblem Engage is set on the continent of Elyos. 1,000 years before the game's events, a group of legendary heroes managed to subdue a powerful beast called the Fell Dragon and sealed it away in order to bring about a period of peace. A millennium later, a blue and red-haired being named Alir awakens with no memory of their past. As it turns out, Alir is a divine dragon with mysterious powers and is tasked with seeking out 12 powerful emblem rings in an attempt to put the evil to rest yet again. Doing this requires enlisting many companions along the way, and properly harnessing the emblem rings to unleash the heroes of the past as well. As a side note, Alir can be made either male or female based on the player's choice, which is a feature I can't remember seeing before in any other console RPG. But worry not, adventurers, because regardless of which option you choose, Alir's hair will still be both blue and red. Nothing to worry about there. If you're an old school Fire Emblem fan coming back to the series to play this one, I want to make something clear right away. And that's that if you strip away all the flashy new colors, graphics, storyline ideas, and gameplay mechanics, Fire Emblem Engage is still a Fire Emblem game at its core. And what I mean by that is it's a grid-based tactical RPG where your team of units squares off against opponents in large battles. Leveling up, outsmarting your adversaries, and using character relationships to your advantage are all factors that play an enormous role in the gameplay and overall experience. It's exactly what you would expect from a Fire Emblem game. In fact, playing through this one is kind of like enjoying the sight of a spruced up car, but once I got in the driver's seat, I realized it had the same old trusty engine I always loved. So yeah, combat still plays out in player and enemy turns, where each unit moves once and does one action per turn. Fire Emblem Engage is a little bit like its predecessor, Fire Emblem Three Houses, in how it swiftly transitions from the overhead grid view to the individual clashes between units. So whenever you attack or use an ability against an adjacent unit, the camera swings quickly down to the battlefield, which is totally rendered in 3D as well, where the fighting actually plays out. Now, all this may be nothing new to those who have played the recent Fire Emblem games, but I was honestly pretty impressed that the change in vantage point didn't detract from the actual decisions I was making. It was kind of like taking pleasure in watching a film that I had directed, or something like that. There's also a new feature in Fire Emblem Engage called the Break System, where hitting an enemy with an advantageous weapon prevents that enemy from counterattacking until their next turn. The way it works, swords beat axes, axes beat lances, and lances beat swords. This allows for some good old-fashioned opportunism, because you can use other units to inflict massive damage on the enemy with a break status in the meantime. So yeah, it was honestly pretty fun to weaken enemies through break, and then just finish them off with a death blow. The art style for the characters is colorful and distinct, and the animations truly look amazing. Even details that are harder to render with this approach, like character hair, look really great here. I have to commend this one for retaining the old school feel of the series rather than adopting a modern graphical style. The same goes for the storyline sequences before and after battles. I hope the Fire Emblem games always stay this way. I'm a fan of the cel-shaded motif for the series because it really stands out from everything else. In combat, your units can move to cells highlighted in blue and can attack cells highlighted in red. There are also these red targeting lines that show who enemy units are most likely to strike. All this is very helpful information for planning and executing your own movement quickly, and it all functions a lot like it does in other tactical RPGs like Triangle Strategy. Fire Emblem Engage also introduces the chain attack mechanic, where ally units have a chance of adding damage via additional attacks if they're in attack range of an enemy attacked by another unit. This makes it wise to attack units that are near a cluster of your own allied units, and added yet another layer of strategy on top of the brake system, equipment, and all other aspects of the battle. I was also extremely impressed by the beautiful looking character graphics that appear when you hover over units. Each of them has a unique visual animation that helped me differentiate between them, and you're also provided useful statistical information to inform your choices. Remember when I mentioned there is a creative system that I think draws fans from the older Fire Emblem games back to this one? Well, the new innovation of Fire Emblem Engage that interested me most were the Emblem rings, a set of 12 rings you could obtain throughout the game. But what's so special about that, you may ask? Doesn't basically every RPG ever have special items? Well, no doubt they do, but these items are a bit unique in that they bring back some of the best Fire Emblem characters from the past by associating each Emblem ring with an Emblem hero. So equipping these bad boys ties the older characters to the new ones, and you'll be able to fight alongside them in battle. And I have to say, I was pretty pumped to see some of my favorite Fire Emblem characters from the past incorporated in this way. For instance, Xygor from Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War was one of my favorite characters, so to see him back in this one, with some of his classic abilities no less, was a great nostalgia trip. And of course, Marth is back too. Equipping Emblem Rings boosts your unit's effectiveness in battle through higher damage and multi-hit attacks. Each character also has a special Engage meter that fills up during combat, and when it's full, you can use the Engage command to fuse with your paired Emblem hero. This gives your unit access to special Engage weapons and allows it to execute super powerful abilities called Engage skills. Other than these mechanics, it's pretty much what you'd expect from a tactical RPG. There are specific win and loss conditions, and battles are epic and usually take quite a long time to complete. This is a Fire Emblem game, so in between battles is where you'll be building character relationships, and you can do this in two major ways. The first is through bond conversations, where your characters interact with each other and increase their friendship levels. Some of this seemed about what I would have expected, but I have to say, some of these conversations were, well, beyond awkward. And by awkward, I don't just mean some of the dialogue is odd. I mean the game turns into what appears to be a creeper dating sim at times. I mean, just look at this. The other characters essentially worship Alir, and are sometimes found staring at him as he wakes up. So yeah, some of these segments seem more like conversing with Jeffrey Dahmer than they do building character relationships. But still, you don't have to spend too much time doing this, and if you can get over it, there's a lot to love about the other parts of the game. You can also develop character bond levels through emblem training in Somniel's Arena, where you can spend bond fragments to raise bond levels. Once your bond levels are raised to a certain threshold, your characters can gain powerful emblem skills through the inheritance system. So once your bond level reaches level 5 with an emblem hero, you can spend SP to inherit skills, which can then be used even when the emblem ring associated with that skill is unequipped. This reminded me a little bit of the class system in Final Fantasy V, where becoming a new class would give you a unique ability right away, but you would also gain permanent abilities associated with that class as time went on. So if character customization is your thing, there's a lot to love here. The soundtrack for Fire Emblem Engage was composed by Yuka Sugiyoko, who's produced music for the series for a long time. And by long, I mean she's created music for the series since the very first Fire Emblem game on the Famicom. Few composers have been tied so closely to such a big series for so long, and the product has definitely come a long way since the SNES days, that's for sure. Honestly, I was a bit blown away by how enjoyable and versatile the score is. There's a lot of classical orchestral style songs packed with woodwinds and brass, but there's also more modern sounding tunes with electric guitars in a heavy metal style. There are even songs that feature classical guitars as well. The quality is really top notch and gives the other great soundtracks on the Switch like Octopath Traveler and Tactics Ogre Reborn a run for their money. So I say bravo to the music and sound because it's awesome in this one. If the skill inheritance and emblem ring systems aren't enough, Fire Emblem Engage also incorporates a class system. All units have a basic class by default, but can upgrade to an advanced class at level 10 by expending a Master Seal, which can be purchased for 2,500 gold. Changing classes in this way upgrades a unit's stats, gives them access to new skills and more weapons, and alters their overall appearance. For instance, when Alear reaches level 10, he can transform from a Dragon Child to Divine Dragon. This boosts his stats significantly and makes his engage meter easier to fill. At level 20, units can repeat the process with a second seal to add a second advanced class. You can definitely play around with many options, and there are several different ways you can go with each unit. It's a lot like Tactics Ogre and Triangle Strategy in that way. One thing I wanted to note too is that even though the older characters in the Fire Emblem universe are revived mostly through the Emblem Ring system, those characters do play a part in the story as well. I won't spoil how, but just know that they're brought into the storyline and play a bigger role than you may have thought going into it. In the end, I can't guarantee all the old school retro RPG freaks will love this one, but it sure seems to be the most accessible Fire Emblem game we've gotten in a long time. Stripped down to the meat and potatoes, it's a solid grid-based tactical RPG with a lot of artistic flair on top. I won't say the story intrigued me as much as many of the older Fire Emblem games did, or even what I saw from Three Houses, but I'd still say it has its moments. Sure, the creepy character bond and awakening sequences are pretty weird, but they're overshadowed by the gameplay, graphics, and soundtrack. And hey, I was honestly pretty impressed by how some of the most memorable characters from Fire Emblem's past were brought back through a creative mechanic that's woven into the gameplay. If one thing is for sure, it definitely has the nostalgia factor going for it. If you're a fan of many of the games I cover or love innovative tactical RPGs, pick it up from one of the links in the description and give it a try. But what do you think? Was Fire Emblem Engage the best Fire Emblem game released yet? Let me know in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell for more retro gaming content. If you want early access to the videos I produce, plus other perks, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon patron or via the YouTube Join feature.